Hey, what's going on, everyone? Dave for Kind Water. So we got guys an update on a significant severe weather outbreak that is expected to take place on Saturday across portions of the Ozarks and the Southern Plains. We also have a big threat in the tropical Atlantic. I've got all the details coming right up, right? So the front of me here on this Thursday evening. We have a lot to talk about in this video. We're going to be going over all the list of details on, again, this pretty significant event of severe weather that is expected to take place on Saturday across most of the Ozarks. As well as again into the Southern Plains. We really are worrying about potential damaging wind and tornado threat. We also do have a pretty significant growing threat in the tropics. We'll be breaking down all of that in today's video. So we're going to start here by taking a look at your current radar. You can see I have one thing going on, which is really the main thing on your screen. One, we do have this big storm system that's working its way across portions of the upper plains. This is your big surface low. It is bringing actually some strong thunderstorms, potentially severe thunderstorms, into portions of Nebraska and northern Kansas, as well as far eastern Colorado. We did actually get a tornado warning in Colorado today just because there is some spin in the atmosphere, so there is a lingering severe weather threat, although at this point it's likely going to be just a bag of gusty winds and heavy rain. But regardless, make sure you are staying safe out there if you are on those roadways, and if you do get caught in that storm. But otherwise, the country is looking pretty good, pretty dry for the most part. Again, still some rain up here in the portions of Montana, North Dakota, as well as the rest of the upper Midwest and Great Lakes region. But once again, the rest of the country looks pretty fabulous other than that. So we move things over now to our alerts here, and you can see we once again don't have much going on right now. Our map has cleared out significantly again since our major nor'easter has moved out, but you can see we do have still some freeze warnings going out for portions of Utah back into far western Colorado, as well as northern New Mexico. So definitely some very cold conditions expected out there. We are going to see some crop damage and potential crop failure in some of those areas. So again, make sure you are heeding all warnings. We also do have some winter weather advisories going out for the upper elevations of western Wyoming. And then we also do have quite a few counties out here in the portions of eastern Ohio, most of West Virginia, upstate New York, and western Pennsylvania, included in frost advisories in that blue shade. And then that dark blue shade, we have once again freeze warnings going out for some of those areas as well down into northern Virginia. Alright, so once again, these are areas that are expected to potentially dip below freezing at times, which is really going to lead to some problems. So any standing water, that's going to have the potential to freeze over, and also obviously crop failure being the biggest threat there. But you really want to make sure that you are obviously bundling up and that you're staying pretty warm, because it's going to get pretty cold again as we get into the next couple of days and eventually into this weekend. But we're going to move over here to the GFS. The big thing, the big show is on Saturday, where once again we have that big severe weather event to talk about. You can see we have our surface low currently moving across portions of the high plains, and that'll eventually move out into the into portions of southern Canada. But that will usher in another round of precipitation from the mountain northwest, guided by a cold front, and that is going to kind of kickstart your surface low, where you do get enough forcing from this trough that we'll talk about in a minute, which does end up again causing that surface low to kind of come to fruition there, and it does actually initiate a very strong sub 1000 millibar low, 998 millibars. You can see some pretty significant thunderstorm activity on the south side, again, all the way down from really Indiana, Illinois, through the lower Midwest, Ohio Valley, and down to the Ozarks as far south as Louisiana. And then that cold front is continuing to dip a little bit farther south and really start to get a very strong signature of some potentially gusty to damaging winds on the backside of this. You have a lot of cold air that's really ripping and pulling and wrapping around into the center of circulation, which again is just going to lead to a lot of wind and just very strong low-level jet. Again, this storm is likely going to bring some pretty significant impacts regardless of if you're going to be getting severe weather or not, but still some very heavy rain really for all of the Great Lakes regions looks very likely here. Again, anywhere around that low pressure center looks like we're going to get some times of some moderate to heavy rain. Again, that's going to be pretty consistent as we get through the weekend. So weekend washout coming up here for the entire Ohio Valley, and some very gusty winds, especially if you're a little bit up towards that cold front, because again, it's going to try to wrap itself into the circulation of the storm, which is just going to generate some stronger winds on the backside, which is a pretty classic pattern and just theme that we see with these surface lows, especially in the fall, where we usually get those, again, comma shaped or negatively tilted troughs that again bring lots of gusty winds, usually on the backside, but also on the front side of the storm system as well. Alright, so beyond that, we take a look quickly at the future. Again, this is when the GFS can get a little wonky, but you can see that it does want another storm system to develop around the 27th. Again, this is way too far out to talk about any specifics. You're already talking about 11 days out from now, but you do have another storm system developing here right around the same area. So again, what we can take away from this is the GFS does want to continue that active pattern with lots of rain and snow coming in the Pacific Northwest. That is also something we need to watch out for, and at this point it does also bring a pretty similar likely severe weather event to the lower Midwest as we get into next week. So definitely just some activity expected ahead. Now, where's it going to be impacting? We're not so certain about that, but it looks like there's a pretty good chance that it's going to be somewhere around the central United States. But we also are expecting, again, the Pacific Northwest to stay very, very wet, with both rain and snow expected over the next couple of days and likely the next couple of weeks. But we take a look now at the Day 3 SPC outlook. This is our severe thunderstorm outlook. As of right now, we do have a level 2 out of 5 slight risk for severe weather. It's pretty broad. This is including parts of southern Illinois down through southern Missouri, through the Boot Heel, far western Kentucky, western Tennessee, extreme northwestern Mississippi, northern Louisiana, northeastern Texas, and eastern Oklahoma, as well as all of Arkansas. Again, that is a level 2 out of 5 slight risk for severe weather, and in that green shade, that's where we have the marginal risk. I do think that this slight risk may expand, especially to the north, because I do think that if we do see a more larger scale event and just, a bigger squall line potentially, I think that could definitely lead some higher chances or probabilities of severe weather a little bit farther north. I also do think that this has the ability to be upgraded. Obviously, we'll see what kind of move they do or choose over the next couple of days, if you will. But I would not rule out seeing an enhanced risk upgrade to this in a couple of days at least. Again, 3 days for this to change. So a lot's going to change with this. But the equivalent percentage of severe weather with that slight risk is 15% and 5% in that marginal risk. So that's all the information we have now. We don't have a full tornado, wind, and hail outlook just yet. We'll get that in tomorrow. But again, this is definitely a relatively aggressive and active-looking severe weather outlook for our Day 3, which again is going to be Sunday as we get into the 18th and the 19th. Saturday as we get into the 18th and the 19th. All right. So we finally now start looking at the NAM 3 km model, or I believe this is the 12 km model, kilometer model. We're going to be looking at now your dew points here, breaking down the thermodynamics of this storm system. And you can see already as we're getting into Friday, what's really interesting about this pattern is that first storm system, because it's moving so far north, it allows for all of this warm air to surge way up into that low pressure center. So that's why you already have dew points into the 60s a day prior to the event. So the warm sector is already kind of put in place by the initial storm system, and so you really don't need a huge moisture pull again to get moist enough air, or warm enough air, I should say, allowing that storm to develop precipitation. You can see that's exactly what happens, but it does manage to pull a little bit more warm air up. We actually do get dew points into the 70s across portions of the southern plains back into Oklahoma and Texas here. And we do get a pretty nasty looking warm sector again with very moist dew points, very humid air. Again, all coming out from the Gulf of Mexico, and this is going to be clashing with a very sharp cold front sweeping down from the northwest. So again, all of this is kind of coming together to create a battle zone, which will likely lead to severe weather. And again, that's all going to be happening right into the Ozarks and a little bit farther north back into the Central Plains. So right into here is where we're going to see again those two clashing air masses, which is just going to be one of the factors that will likely lead to again, this event being a little bit more serious, and you can really start to see that cold front take down those dew points as we get farther and farther into Saturday and eventually into Sunday. But again, dew points get very high, very healthy looking atmosphere predicted by the NAM, again, getting into the mid and upper 60s across most of our slight risk, and I really do think that, again, if the storms do take advantage of this moisture, they could grow pretty strong and, again, become severe rather quickly. And that does take us now to our surface-based CAPE, again, on the same NAM run that we just looked at, and this is another way we can look at our thermodynamics. Basically, this is just another way of looking at thunderstorm juice, or in a more scientific way, we could call it convective available potential energy, which, like I said, is just basically how much juice is in the atmosphere for these thunderstorms to run off of. And you can see lots of energy in the atmosphere, already above 3,000 joules per kilograms of CAPE across most of southwestern Missouri, back into southern Kansas, lots of eastern Oklahoma, all the way down to Texas here. Again, anywhere in this orange or red shade, this is what we're talking about dew point, or excuse me, CAPE values of in excess of 2,000 joules per kilograms, which is around, what's required for severe thunderstorms. So this is plenty of CAPE and instability in the atmosphere, again, predicted by the NAM as we're getting into Saturday afternoon. And you can see, really, once those storms develop, they really take advantage of that, and those CAPE values quickly die down. So that also can bring forth the question, are these storms going to be long-lasting, or are they going to die out pretty quickly? Because, again, you can see CAPE values take a steep incline and then completely get wiped out, again, by that cold front and by those storms. So this could definitely lead to more kind of less long-tracked supercells than expected. So again, I really do think that it's going to be possible that we do see, again, some more short-lasting, if you will, storms, again, as they sweep through that region. So we now move on to your supercell composite parameter, which is going to be a kind of tool that we use to see, what kind of storm mode we may be talking about. Again, supercells are those discrete thunderstorms that are able to rotate and produce tornadoes. And you can see we do have a pretty solid signal, again, building into our slight risk region, really all the way from southern Missouri down back into northern Texas. Anywhere in these yellows or these orange shades, this is what we're talking about. Again, the chance for seeing some supercell development, and that's where we could really be talking about, again, the highest tornado threat. You can see this gets up to about a 20-25 or so, again, at its peak across portions of northern Arkansas. So where most of these parameters kind of overlap, it's really in this corridor here from southern Missouri down through northwestern Arkansas, eastern Oklahoma, and a little bit of southern Kansas there. So that's, again, right where that slight risk is, and also where that slight risk could get expanded. But again, that is the latest supercell composite parameter from the NAM. And then one more thing to look at before we get into our full tornado breakdown is our storm relative helicity, which basically shows us how much spin or kind of lift in the atmosphere, how much, is present. And you can see that we actually do have quite a bit as we're getting into our main event. You can see as we're getting to Saturday morning and afternoon, we really do see those SRH values spike, especially down here into the Boot Heel of Missouri. Look, we're approaching 400 meters squared per second squared. So again, this is a very healthy atmosphere in terms of a tornado threat. Again, anywhere along these couple points here where these SRH values spike, this is where we really do have the chance to see some rotating supercells. Again, if we do see more of that discrete storm mode. Now, we're unclear or unsure about what that storm mode is going to look like just yet, but as we get more of those convective available short-range models that come out, we'll really get a good idea of if this is going to be supercellular or if this is going to be linear. And even if it is linear, we're still going to have the potential to see embedded areas of rotation, again, with this much helicity in the atmosphere, again, which is just going to allow for lots of areas of lift or spin to develop. And finally, we now look at your significant tornado parameter, which, you guessed it, is a parameter that we look at to determine which areas have the best shot at seeing tornadoes and obviously potentially a significant tornado. And you can see we actually do have a pretty strong signal developing back here into portions of Oklahoma. This is right around where the storms will initiate, so it's interesting here to see that this is happening earlier on rather than towards the end of the event. And you can see again our STP values do get above a 4.5 again across portions of eastern Oklahoma, especially in those purple areas. So we'll actually click for a sounding here again in one of these bullseye areas, if you will, and you can see that this is a pretty concerning looking sounding. Again, that possible hazard type being a PDS tornado, very curved and elongated holograph, which is just kind of the kind of shape that you look for when you're talking about a tornadic environment. You can see our storm slinky is almost turned a perfect 80 degrees, 77 degrees, and it gives us basically a 2D view of what a parcel, an air parcel, would look like as it goes up into an updraft. And again, you can really see how it would begin to rotate and spin, which kind of goes back into the SRH discussion. But you can see also our skew-T is very impressive here. Again, very impressive thermodynamics, 76 degree temperature, 69 degree dew points. Again, almost a 70 degree dew point. That is a very rich and moist atmosphere loaded for, again, the potential for widespread supercell development. You can see our Cape values over 3,000 joules per kilogram. You can see our SRH is right around 300 meters squared per second squared. So again, not the greatest, but definitely pretty good. And then our effective layer steer at 56 knots, which is pretty impressive and definitely significant enough. 3 Cape values over 240 joules per kilogram, so obviously very, very favorable there. And also your supercell composite parameter over 21.5, so very, very concerning looking sounding here. Again, your analogs supporting both significant hail and supercells. So again, that is going to be across portions of eastern Oklahoma back into Missouri and Arkansas. Earlier on, I really do think we could be talking about a pretty significant tornado threat, and that's why I do think we could see that slight risk get upgraded to an enhanced risk, as that tornado threat will be very present, but potentially could be dangerous and significant. Alright? So that's enough with severe weather. Now let's get into the second half of today's video. We're going to be moving on here to the tropics, where we do have a tropical wave that we are monitoring here. It is moving across the main development region. A lot of the models have picked up on a significant signal for this to develop. So this is your tropical wave right here. Again, very unorganized, not expected to become organized over the next couple of days at least. But once it works its way into the Caribbean, we really are worrying about the threat of some pretty extensive development. Again, these are very favorable waters. They've been pretty favorable all season, except storms have really struggled to move into this area. In fact, the storms have more or less moved north of there into the southwest Atlantic, which has really spared the United States from a direct impact. And I really do think that one of the reasons why we didn't see a landfalling hurricane this season in the Atlantic, or at least on U.S. soil, is because most storms went north of the Caribbean, and again, if they went through this area, they would have the opportunity to go through the wide open Gulf of Mexico, but you also have obviously these very warm waters down here south of the Antilles, which are also very supportive of development. So this is a kind of channel that we look for, where if storms make it through here, this is where they have really the possibility of strengthening pretty significantly, but also they are surrounded by bodies of land, so it's pretty hard not to get an impact on somebody, whether it be the United States, Mexico, Central America, or even Cuba, and obviously Antilles. Everybody's at risk, so it really all depends on where these storms go and how strong they get. So again, that is the current look at what we got going on with our satellite loop. You can see on our National Hurricane Center forecast homepage, we have 2 areas of interest to watch. One is we do have, actually I believe this is the remnants of our nor'easter currently working its way across the North Atlantic. It does actually now have a 10% chance of developing a couple hundred miles south of Nova Scotia. Not expecting development. Again, this is down to 10%, but there is a very slight chance that it could gain some tropical features, so nothing to worry about with this. Again, not expected to make any sort of landfall on any areas, but this is the main attraction here. This is our disturbance 1, which currently has a 30% chance of development, and you can see it is marked here by the National Hurricane Center, and it's expected to move into the Caribbean Sea as we get into the next couple of days, eventually into next week. So again, this is a pretty wide open basin for development. I really do think that this should not be slept on again, as the storm really has the potential to go bonkers out here with that development. So, speaking of bonkers, we now look at the GFS 18Z. We're going to be comparing the GFS, the European, the Canadian, the European AI, and eventually going to be looking at the ensemble runs, all to break down all the information that we have now on where this storm is going to go and how strong it could get. So the latest 18Z GFS. Well, you got your storm down here moving its way through the Lesser Antilles. Just this green blob down here does not have a designated low pressure signature. There you get it, right around 1,004 millibars. It does start to slow down and stall out as we're getting to Friday of next week. So already about a week out, so pretty far out. We're already about 192 hours out. Then we do get this storm to deepen into a 994 millibar low, likely a high-end tropical storm, and it does go under some pretty rapid intensification, but it takes a full loop and it completely turns around and goes back up into the Lesser Antilles, but moves north and continues to move northeast away from the rest of the Southwest Atlantic, and continues to strengthen and becomes likely a major hurricane out there and goes way off into the Central Atlantic, only bothering the fish. So that is a pretty hopeful looking run on the GFS 18Z. Today's theme has significantly been a downtrend, at least for the possibility or threat to land. Again, yesterday's threat looked a lot more concerning. We look at yesterday's runs, and even, last night's runs on yesterday, they still had the storm curving north, but you could look at one of the morning runs, and again, this is the thing that got us a little bit more worried, is that we saw that the model putting out the storm getting a little bit closer to the United States. That is still a possibility. We are still very far out. But the good news is that the GFS has latched onto a signal that is supporting the storm to go way out to sea and only bother the fish. That is certainly a possibility, but definitely something that we can't just focus in on, because there are obviously other possible solutions in which this storm is going to take. But the European model was the European show. This is the 12Z European. You can see it does also pop off that low pressure system. Now it does miss the window of opportunity to move north and curve out to sea. So it does not align with the GFS, but it does also show the storm developing, and it does get itself much farther towards the Gulf Coast, and it just stalls out really just to the north or so of Belize, and gets right around the Yucatan Peninsula, or gets right around Central America, back into the Gulf of Mexico, and you can see it does actually deep into a 982 millibar low, so likely a Cat 1, Cat 2 hurricane, and then it strengthens once again and turns around. Again, this is getting very far out on the European model, so not worth, looking at for specifics, but then it goes under complete rapid intensification, goes haywire, becoming a full-on major Category 4, Category 5 hurricane. So please do not tell your cat's mother's sister's father's dog that we are going to see a major hurricane impact Cuba on October 31st, which would be Halloween, at 8 a.m. That's not going to happen, but what we can take away from this is that the European model does not agree with the GFS. It does actually have this storm waiting a little bit longer for development, and it does actually have that opportunity to stall out and become, obviously, a very strong, potentially major hurricane. So I do think a hurricane threat is definitely possible, and this is one of the solutions where we really can't rule out seeing a landfall on any of these areas out here, again, in the Southwest Atlantic. Now we look at the Canadian. Okay, the Canadian, it does also have this storm developing, but much quicker. It actually already has a likely tropical depression before the storm even makes it past the Lesser Antilles. So even earlier than the GFS, much later than the European model. But this is your storm down here. I don't know why my pen size is so small, but we should be back there. And we continue to move this run into motion. You can see we do get this storm down again into the 997 range. So right around a low end tropical storm, and it continues to kind of slowly move along there and doesn't go too crazy with development. And it does impact portions of the Dominican Republic as well as Haiti. But it really doesn't go too crazy. Again, Puerto Rico also getting some impacts there. but it just continues to move north and kind of gets swallowed up by another surface that develops off the coast. So nothing much really happens on this run of the Canadian, but it does also show the storm potentially developing into a named storm again as we get into the middle part of next week. So another signal there from one of the major models that we look at. Now we look at the European AI, which is one of the more less aggressive models here that we look at for development. And you can see it also does slightly miss that window of opportunity to pull the storm out to sea like the GFS, but it does pop that low pressure center off, and it does actually get attracted by whatever force is pulling on it to move out to sea, and it does eventually move north, and it does strengthen down into the 999 millibar range and does make a technical landfall on Haiti and the Dominican Republic as, again, a very low-end tropical storm, and then it kind of just continues to slow down and move across this southwestern Atlantic and really doesn't do much. So pretty limited impacts there on the European AI. Alright, so after looking at those four major model runs, we can take away that the European is staying very strong. It is currently an outlier as far as the storm getting super strong and making a landfall, but the rest of the models, the GFS, the Canadian, the Euro AI, all support the storm getting a little bit stronger, but don't end up taking it completely out towards the Gulf of Mexico and turning into a major hurricane. But we now look at the GFS ensemble here, also known as our spaghetti plots. You can see we have quite the signal with a lot of members showing up here across, again, the Southwest Atlantic, in line with today's operational run, again, showing that perfect curve up to the north and eventually out to sea. So that would obviously be the better solution, but there are those few that do bring this into the Southwest Atlantic and potentially even the Gulf of Mexico, which obviously does bring also the threat of seeing those very strong lines there. Again, a lot of these members bring this down into a major hurricane, which is obviously something that we really need to watch out for. Again, and that's why we really can't rule out the threat of seeing something like what the European was showing, where we do see a much stronger named storm, potentially a strong hurricane, if the storm makes it a little bit farther to the west. And for the last part of the update, we now look at the European ensemble, a little less aggressive, but again, much less aggressive on just the fact that it would curve north. Only a couple members showing that here, but most of the members keeping this a little bit more flat out and bringing it much farther west, closer towards the Gulf of Mexico, alright? So I appreciate all of you for tuning in. That's going to be the end of the video, so I hope you guys had a great day. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video.